Hello and welcome back to another video. Today here again on Forza Horizon 5 to take a look at another week's brand new car pass vehicle. This week we have the brand new Mini JCW GP to take a first look at. So yes, the new Mini we've got this week is the 2021 JCW GP. So, well, a very, very new Mini hot hatch, which is good to see because we haven't had a new one for a very long time. The last JCW GP is a 2012 car, so 9 years older than this new one, so it is about time it was updated and re-adding. We do have surprisingly few 2021 and 2022 cars in Forza. Yes, there are some, but really they need to be adding cars sooner than they do. They do seem to spend or take a lot of time to add some new things. So it has a 2-litre 4-cylinder engine, the previous car only having a 1.6, producing 302 horsepower up from the previous generation, or previous one we had in Forza's 215, 450 newton meters of torque up from previous 280, and well, one stat it does fall down on is the weight. It's up to 1,295 kilos, with the previous one being over 100 kilos lighter, although all of these numbers mean it is now up in A-class at 719, with the previous car being a B628. And in reality, all of these upgrades and, well, this whole package of the GP will cost you a massive £33,895, which is a lot for what is effectively a 1 Series with a wing on the back. But anyway, it's still an incredibly cool little car, and on this first drive here through these roads, there's surprisingly little understeer, even given how much power is going through the front wheels. That is a ridiculous over 300 horsepower going through front wheels. It really shouldn't turn in as well as it does, so I don't know how they've managed that. But yeah, it's an incredibly good handling little, well, even though it's not all that little anymore, the Mini. As for the interior, it's a nice place to be, although it's a shame the huge round dial in the centre that used to be the speedometer in Minis of old has become a screen, although the graphic on it is really fun to watch and, well, incredibly distracting, which is a little bit irritating when you're trying to drive fast. But yeah, it is quite cool, but it's a shame that we've lost the speedometer there. And out on the exterior, it is absolutely mad, especially with those carbon arches and the massive rear wing, although neither of them are necessary in any world, really. They are completely ridiculous. I mean, why would a front-wheel drive car need that much downforce? It's just gonna, well, not that it's a particularly effective wing, probably, it's just for looks, but yeah, you really don't need downforce at the back in a front-wheel drive car. If anything, that's a bad idea. And the carbon on these arches, whilst incredibly aggressive visually, and, well, kind of cool to look at, it is particularly stupid, because, well, if anything hits you, that's going to be incredibly expensive. So having a bit of the car that's most likely to get hit by somebody in carbon is just ridiculous, and it sticks out a fair bit, so yeah, it's really not a good idea. And those massive reflectors on the front of the carbon there are, well, particularly horrible. And yeah, another thing, a tiny little mistake they've made, is that apparently that chrome trim around the window should be black to match the de-chromed look of the grille and all of the other little bits that would usually be chrome on the standard model. So that's a small little mistake they've made, although it's not really anything to be too fussed about, but it is slightly a shame. And then onto the motorway, as you see here, we did manage to get up to a top speed of just over 160 on the flat section, and to, as near as makes no difference, 170 on the downhill, which is absolutely ridiculous for what is an overpriced 1 Series. But yeah, a car this small should not be going at that kind of speed. It is quite ridiculous. And for some reason, it has a stupid automatic gearbox with 8 gears, which kind of confused me, because surely a Mini is supposed to be a simple driver-focused little car with a manual with kind of no less, more than 5 gears. Anyway, it has these 8 gears. The 8th is entirely useless. 7th I did use on the top speed here. But anyway, now we've established it handles well, has a ridiculous top speed, and has some ridiculous carbony bits all over it. Shall we see what it does around a racing track? Because it is, after all, a JCW GP, and that is kind of the best location for it. So, as with all other brand new cars here on Forza Horizon 5, the Mini was given 5 laps around the festival to see what the best time I could set was. Now, the first thing I noticed with the Mini is, having said there was no understeer whatsoever really on the road, in a track environment, when you're pushing the car a little bit more, the understeer was, well, it was noticeable. You could feel that the car was handling like that. It's to be expected from a front-wheel drive car with 300 horsepower. It's no worse than any other, but where I couldn't really feel that on the road, that was much more noticeable on the track. You can see me running wide on that corner, but particularly in the first corner there was a problem with it running a bit wide under power, and on a couple of laps it actually violently snapped into oversteer, which again is something that sometimes happens with front-wheel drive cars. If you're braking or lifting off or whatever, you get oversteer sometimes. So yeah, it was understeering in that corner and occasionally kicking into some oversteer, which was a little bit, well, annoying. It kind of threw a couple of laps out of the window. But apart from that, it felt like it had good power and acceleration on the straights, and it was okay around the corners despite that slight understeer tendency, because once you got used to the handling and figured out how much you could push it on power without it pulling itself too far wide, it really was not too bad to drive and set some reasonable laps, as you saw in the first corner there. Taking it slightly smoother on the accelerator meant it just didn't power out towards the wall quite as much, but still making most of the track on the way out there. And again, through this corner, slightly earlier on the brakes, slightly slower onto the power, it's nice and smooth around there, not pulling itself out towards the wall. So yeah, once you got used to it, you could kind of get around the understeer, but yeah, it took a few laps to get used to it, which some cars I'm immediately comfortable with. This took a little bit of getting used to, mostly because I haven't really driven any front-wheel drive cars for a while, particularly with 300 horsepower. The old muscle car we got before didn't have that much power. But yeah, it didn't do too badly around the festival, although it's hard to compare it exactly to things because the cars above and below it on the leaderboard have got a slight difference in PI from the Mini. So the best lap time I could set around the festival was a 1 minute 12.139, although for the first few laps I wasn't quite getting to that pace. But that means for its PI it's sitting roughly where it should. The car above it, the TTS, is up at 724, and the car below it, the older TTRS, is down at 707 PI and set to 113, and the faster TT is setting a 111 something. So it's just between them, which is where you'd expect it to be for its PI number. So the Mini has some interesting customization options. What you see on it is actually Forza Aero, rather surprisingly. That absolutely stupid rear wing, usual front Forza Aero, although that sort of clashes with the different carbon style on the, extra, whatever those silly carbon bits are called. But yeah, I thought the stock wing was overkill for a front-wheel drive hatchback, but that's an option. And if you're wondering about the colours, basically there's 3 paint groups, the green, the pink and the orange, so you can paint those areas on their own. So that front grille bit is, and the roof, because Minis often have different coloured roofs, I will sort it so it's a slightly nicer colour. That's just to kind of give you an idea of the 3 different groups. But yeah, that wing is quite horrible, and I'm going to take it off in a minute. Although, having said that, it is, it's more interesting than normal Forza Aero. So hopefully, given this is a different Forza Aero to what we've seen on all cars previously, it means they are going to make some cars have their own exclusive wings rather than them all having exactly the same. The other things of note in the customization are, well, of course, you've got your rear-wheel drive and all-wheel drive swaps, and there's only one engine swap to something not very interesting. So none of that's really of interest. Just wanted to show you the crazy, crazy wing and the paint groups, really. So I've now upgraded the car to the top of A-Class and taken it around the festival for another 5 laps to see what the best I could get out of it was. The fastest A-Class car still being the Suman-tuned Alpine, which went round in a 106.3 something, but much faster than anything else that I've built so far. As always with the upgrades, I've left the engine and drivetrain standard, so in this case it has been kept front-wheel drive. I've given it full-width off-road race tyres, brought the track width out, which is mostly for visual purposes really, let's be honest, but also upgraded the gearbox, but not fully to race, just so I could do the final drive. Brakes were left alone because the only upgrade was race, so it clearly already had very good brakes. And then gave it full weight reduction and upgraded all of the engine parts from the standard engine, apart from the turbos and the camshafts. So everything else completely upgraded, which means the weight is now down to 1,181 kilos and the power is up to 426 horsepower, which meant I was slightly worried about it being, well, at the top of A-Class with that much power and still front-wheel drive, and I was kind of right to be. The understeer is amplified somewhat, but once you got used to it again, as with the stock version, and you kind of got used to how much power you could give it without it pulling itself out too far wide, it was still very nice to drive and ended up being pretty quick, actually. So the best time I could get out of the Mini was a rather amazing 106.6 exactly, but that was a lot faster than I was expecting, to be honest. It's only 3/10 off the Alpine, which, yes, is primarily tuned as a rally car, but still, it's still an incredibly fast car, that with an incredibly fast tune on it. So to get a 106.6, just 3/10 off that, I'm really impressed with the little Mini, and that's half a second faster than any other A-Class car that I've built, the next fastest being the Golf R at a 107.1, and that had all-wheel drive. But yeah, front-wheel drive can be very good in Forza. I'm not sure it's quite as good as it was in some previous games, but 106.6 is a really, really good time from the Mini, and that's with a really quick tune that I've put on it. So if somebody that knows what they're doing gets their hands on it, I think this could be quite a good car. Well, a very good car, in fact. So yeah, very impressed with the little Mini JCW GP stock. Not sure about it. I think it's kind of a bit too fast for a front-wheel drive hatchback. But having said that, I then went and upgraded it. It has ridiculous aero, stock and upgraded, that silly wing and stupid carbon side bits from stock, and then that absolutely ridiculous Forza wing that we found in the upgrades. It was, well, pretty amazing to see. I don't like it personally, but it's good to see they're adding something different. And like I say, incredibly, well, fast for something that I've tuned at the top of A-Class. I mean, it's not really surprising. A small hatchback front-wheel drive things can be good, and small, light, will handle well, I guess. Well, it's quite light once I lightened it a bit. But yeah, very impressed with the little Mini JCW GP. So if you haven't gone in and claimed this from the car pass, do go and do it, because it's a very good little car. And I do particularly like the livery I found here, the really, really deep red, and of course the classic Mini checkered flag roof, which I think looks really cool. I do personally prefer the look of the old one, but anyway, there we go. Mini JCW GP, taking a first look at it here in Forza Horizon 5. Really enjoyed it, and it's been a lot better than I thought it would be. So yeah, do let me know if you've enjoyed this one. Plenty more new cars we can test out in the coming weeks and months. But for now, for a first look at the new Mini, that is going to be all. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll be back with the next video very soon.